Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain. I want to talk about something, Barnett, that you brought up the other day, which I thought was really brilliant. You were doing some processing. That's funny coming out of the last segment.
Yeah.
You were doing. You were in the beautiful chaos and exploring the frontier in your sleeping, waking, sort of wee hours of the morning kind of experience, and specifically around how money has become the landing place for so much of your neuroses, and how much weight you've given it, weight weighing on you, and importance, that kind of weight. And it was funny because we were talking in the morning. You're like, wow, I really was in it last night. Because we folks, if you haven't figured this out, we talk all the time during the week. We're, besides being good friends, and besides working together, we're good friends. And we kind of just, this whole show has taken on a life of its own, independent of just what goes on air. There's a whole process that goes on behind the scenes in our friendship, in our community, and who we hang out with, and how we operate. What I loved is you said, it could very well have been my underwear. Like, what if my underwear was the place, the receptacle for all
my neuroses?
For all my neuroses. And you started playing out that analogy. I don't know if we can recapture it, but I loved that analogy, in part because it was funny, like, how absurd. But it pointed to the absurdity of what I and you, because we share this, and then collectively I see this all over the place, what we've put on money. Like, it's such a placeholder that we put all this stuff in, and it's money. And if the money were here, then that would have all this stuff.
It's the symbol. We don't have a lot of time in this segment, so we promise you, listeners, that we will return to this subject very, very soon as the topic for a whole show. So to give you a little taste.
Or shows.
It'll go on and on. Probably,
it's the theme.
I've only been working this for 60 years, so it might be one or two more shows. What's another show or another hour or two? But we have, as a culture, as a world, we have taken money, which is an instrument that marks the movement of good and service between individuals and systems. That's what money is, people. It is a marker that demonstrates, like dye in the bloodstream, how good and service moves through a community. It's a lot more convenient than thanks for the can of paint, here's this pig under my arm.
Right.
So, but what has happened is that it has become the depository, since it is a placeholder for relationship, it has become the depository of all of our neuroses, both public and personal. So when in the temple story, Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God. What is being referred to that is that, yes, we're not, as the cliche goes, spiritual beings having physical lives. More accurately, we're spiritual beings having physical lives as spiritual beings. And so he is referring to, in the illusion of the dream, I look both ways before I cross the street. I pay my taxes. I pay my traffic ticket, or I do traffic school, as I've just so successfully completed.
Again and again.
That is abiding by the rules of the Caesar rules. But not to confuse it with the big game of the big consciousness game, which is a God game. So where I go off the rails, where I have been off the rails consistently, is, yes, I am all enrolled in God we trust, except when it comes to money, because that is the place where my ego, where all my neurotic stuff around control, around big parts and little parts. Right. If I could take my foot off the reservation of well, a part of me wants. Well, obviously, the part of me that is controlling around money is the part that's causing the problem.
Right.
The part that, as Einstein said, or as the Buddha said, the part of you that has the problem is the problem.
Is the problem. Yeah.
So that piece is not is not in the Caesar game. It is the controlling piece that says, no, the Caesar game supersedes the God game. Now, we do it around money. I do it around money, but I could just as easily do it around relationships and love affairs and marriages and betrayals. I know plenty of people do it there. I could do it around health considerations, personal, and around those that I love, chronic things. I know people, and we all know, you listeners know people who do it there. Yeah. I could do it around weight functions, weight loss, weight release. You certainly are an expert in working with thousands of clients all over the world who come to you with all kinds of issues around that. Freeman, I need to release, I need to have a different relationship with weight. None of these things have to do with overeating, nor do they have to do with binge spending, nor do they have to do with infidelities in relationship or any of the infinite expressions of that. They all have to do with certain kinds of neurotic patterns and behaviors that we exteriorize, and we make that the object. So when you see all sorts of workshops about, well, we can take you through, you can magnetize money to you.
Right.
Yes, you can. It looks like that anyway. You can magnetize love to you. You can find soulmates. You can reduce the weight.
Until you can't. Until that mechanism of relating to the receptacle.
As long as you see it as outside of you.
Yeah.
As long as I see money as outside of me, as opposed to an expression of who I am, just as my marriages, my friends are, my relationships are, a place where I feel both trusting and trustworthy. I do not get anxious about where my next breath of air is going to come from. I do not wake up anxious about whether my wife still loves me or is going to leave me. I do not wake up anxious around my weight. But I do wake up, I put my neurotic behaviors, I put it in, but I may never get another job again.
Right.
And then, it's such a complicated web of dynamic complexity that we have things like I saw one yesterday on our YouTube channel, somebody talking about a guest of ours, wasn't me, but a guest that was on the show, and doubting their integrity, and saying, he could say all these things because he's rich.
Right.
And then I remember, I won't make it more personal than that, but that is all a relative. First of all, it's relative to your own neurosis. And also, when somebody makes their safety or their value or their permission to be, or when they process all data through a lens of, am I worthy of love? Does this person really want me, or do they want an image of me? Or why am I binge eating? I need to accumulate nest eggs, and I can't spend one little acorn, because if I do, I'm spending my safety, my security, my self-worth. However those neuroses show up, it is never about the object of your desire.
That's it. So what we want ultimately to do, and this is obviously going to extend out to many conversations, is we want to relate to the neuroses versus the object of the neuroses and keep pretending it's about that.
That's part one. Before we leave, with that, part two is we have to own that we have to collapse this idea of an inner and an outer, and an up and a down, as I think it was the Gospel of Thomas, when you make the inner the same as the outer and the male the same as the female and the up. That is an esoteric language for collapsing the subject and the object. There is only a frequency.
Yep.
And with that, I know we've opened many cans of many worms. We'll thread back to this in the future.
So keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness.